Hello, everybody. Welcome. I am Patrick Farrar, and thank you for joining us for another installment of the Opinionated Stance podcast. Please do me a huge favor and visit opinionatedstance.com. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and Google Play. Also, we have a YouTube channel. Subscribe there. We put the audio there, so you can check it out in that form as well. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, show ideas, please reach out. We'd love to hear feedback from our listeners, and thank you from the bottom of my heart. The feedback that we've gotten so far about the shows have been tremendous, and it makes me want to take and do the show continually going forward. So thank you again. Today we are going to talk about two very important topics that are dear to my heart: mentorship and building a work life that you really are proud of and really want. I felt that these topics were perfect to discuss today with our guest and very close friend and mentor of mine, Zack Gilbert. Zack has been a freelance software engineer for over a decade and has mastered a work-life balance that includes working with new and exciting technology and also international travel. Yes, international travel. Zack is also one of my first mentors in the software space, who has helped guide me in developing a career in software in Chicago. Zack, thank you for being here today on the show.
Thanks for having me, Patrick. I'm a big fan of the show, so really glad to be here.
Yeah, long time listener, first time caller.
Exactly.
Yeah, perfect. So, Zack, why don't you do me a favor, and for the people that don't know about you or about the man, the myth, and the legend, please tell them a little bit more about your background, what you've done in the past, where you see yourself going, where any new horizons or international travels are going to be taking you, like any of that stuff.
Sure. Well, I've been working on the web since I was real young. Started out just kind of, script kiddie, just kind of building stuff, PHP and JavaScript and HTML and all that stuff. And then went to school for IT and web development. And then kind of from that, just, have been continually paid to build things on the internet in various formats. I've worked for a bunch of companies, but ultimately have always ended up back as a freelancer, as like kind of my own company, and doing work on my own. I have a couple of my own software products that I'm now working on, while I still do have a couple clients, but for the most part trying to like move away from that and had kind of just solely doing my own software products.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but yeah, and like you mentioned, kind of a big traveler. My fiance and I kind of have made that a core component of our life. We love to travel, and we try to do that on a regular basis. And we're lucky that both of us own our own company, and so we're the boss and can kind of say when we have vacation days and when we don't.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so it works out well for us. We really enjoy it.
That's cool. I think one of the best things that like can summarize what we're going to be talking today is, yes, we're going to talk about mentorship, and then we're also going to be talking about building that work life you want. But today's show is ultimately going to be about lifestyle. It's going to be about how to take and see change in your life, and also ways that you can take and do things that are, it's not always yourself that's going to be doing it. So like jumping into this first topic about mentorship, I want to share a story that some people might know, some people might not know, but it goes back to the first time I met Zack, and it goes back to something that we've talked about in this episode and previous episodes before about Startup Weekend. But it was like this one fateful weekend.
I remember it fondly.
It was May 2012, and it was ridiculously hot for like May, and beautiful sunny. I think it was like a 75, 80 degree like May weekend here in Chicago. And I had flown back from Seattle after a company that I'd worked with unceremoniously shit the bed. We'll just call it that. And I was looking for opportunities, and I knew that I always wanted to move back here to Chicago, and I attended the Startup Weekend. And one of the most interesting things is I pitched the idea, and the first thing I said when I got up there to pitch my idea is, "Hi, I'm Patrick. This is my idea. I flew in from Seattle to be here. Here's the music idea that I want to pitch," and stuff like that. And immediately after talking about this presentation, Zack comes up to me and is like, "Hey, dude, that's awesome. Thank you for coming here. Let's not only stay in touch, but I want to help you out." And that I want to help you out was, I had a mind in my mindset that I wanted to be back here in Chicago 18 months or so after that day. to take and live and become a software engineer and be part of this community. But with the mentorship and the support from Zack, via email, phone calls and stuff, as I was still living in Seattle, trying to make the transition, actually made that possible. So that's where we go there. And the reason I bring this up as a story is because mentorship starts in many different ways. And it's impactful. So Zack, I want to first off thank you again for taking it. It takes a lot to take and get up and take and, offer yourself there. But I want to take and start to like dive in and stuff. Like, so that's like one example of mentorship. Mm-hmm. What does a mentorship look like to you?
That's really interesting. Because I think that there are multiple forms of mentorship. There's kind of the traditional like mentor mentee, like, I don't know, you kind of think of how it's portrayed in movies or
Seinfeld, the mentor protege thing.
Right, exactly. You have Kramer and whoever he was.
Darren, it was the intern.
Darren,
I literally
right.
watched that last year. Or George with trying to take and do the risk management stuff.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep. So you have that where it's kind of like an established, like it's very like people.
It's an ivory tower institution kind of relationship,
right? And I think it's very much like almost like a established from like college of like, you need a mentor. Go find this person. They're going to help you they're going to have the answers. They're going to guide you.
They're going to have the network. They're going to have
exactly.
This,
And it's very official, and it's very like both people are very aware that it's happening. Like they're very aware of their role. I don't know. Like it's very kind of just someone signs up for it almost, and
there's
it just happens.
There's process in place. It's very formalized. It's
right,
not ad
exactly.
hoc. It's not informal.
Right. But then I think there's also kind of the more natural, kind of more. There's a different form of mentorship where it just kind of happens naturally, and it kind of happens without people realizing it. And I've had way more examples of that in my life.
Right.
And I kind of think of kind of our relationship as kind of more in that realm, where it just kind of happened.
Right.
And it was more of just like, you were someone who you were living your life, and we kind of came into each other's lives, and you were trying to figure something out, and I was just there and just naturally giving either advice or feedback or whatever. And I've had probably a decent amount of mentors,
mentor relationships like
that in my life, where it just kind of, they're not necessarily like super established, mm-hmm. but they still, they provide some amount of value no matter for how long or whatever. Like I know in high school, I had a teacher who was very much like a mentor to me.
Yeah.
Who he was a Latin teacher. I didn't even take Latin, but I just happened to like. He was a nerdy guy.
Yeah.
And there weren't that many people like that in my community.
Sure.
So I just naturally was like, oh, hey, you're a nerd too. Like,
you probably like similar things that I do. We can talk about it.
Yeah, exactly. Like we bonded over like They Might Be Giants, or, like indie movies and stuff like that.
Sure.
And it was just kind of like, as a high school student trying to figure out like, what do I do with my life? Where am I going? How am I, living? He was kind of one of those people that kind of was just like, oh, you don't have to follow the normal route. Like there are other options for you.
Right.
You don't have to, like go this way.
You don't have to do the traditional, like go to this, and this. Like
exactly.
You can take and do what you choose. Like
you can kind of do things a little different. And then in college, I had a teacher who he was, one of my like web development teachers. Mm-hmm. And we would get lunch on a regular basis, kind of meet up. He would help me. I knew very much like what I wanted to do with my life at that point.
Sure.
And it was like, how do I get there? What are the best ways for me to do this? And he kind of helped me, kind of provided me feedback and like kind of help me figure out the route that I needed to go.
Yeah.
But then like once college ended, I probably haven't talked to him since type thing. So it was very much like a situational. It worked for that period of my life. Like I think a lot of people have way more mentor-mentee experiences than they realize, and they just don't even like know that they're happening.
Yeah, because they're unofficial. It's not like this whole
Exactly.
like, oh, I'm your mentor, you're going to listen to everything I say. It's I think the way that it's like, we can take and look at it from like just a standpoint of our scenario. You moved from New York to Chicago, like, and you got plugged into this community, and you did what I was looking to do. And not only did like from our standpoint, we're working in the same technology that I was just learning. So our relationship had a lot of different things of like getting plugged in and all this other stuff. But never did our like initial like conversations be, oh, you need to go learn this on this thing. I'd ask you questions and you'd respond, but you never tell me the answer. It was always, that's not a bad thing. You would always provide me the opportunity. You'd put me in the direction to take oh, you should go talk here, or you should take and look at this. And I think that was the thing. It's like, I think anytime you're in a situation where you're doing some sort of continual learning, there's some sort of mentorship going on, regardless if you think it is.
Totally.
If you're averse to it, okay. If you don't like mentorship, don't call it mentorship, but it's happening regardless.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah. It's totally happening around you. It happens more often than you think,
right?
More than you realize. And it's just because of a natural like dynamic between people, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think in our startup community and our like the Chicago dev community, it's a very tight knit community in terms of like the developers. I know that on the handful of people that I have in my network, we talk a lot about different things and bounce ideas back off of it. And one time you could be the expert on quote unquote expert on topic, and then other time you could be the bottom of the like, I don't have the slightest idea.
Yep.
And so like even like our relationship, like in a relationship, the mentor could be a mentor on one topic, but also the protege on the other one.
Yep.
We could be the George
Costanza.
Yes, we could be the George Costanza, the Mr. Miyagi in one, and then we could be the Kenny Banya in the other. So, it's really interesting. So, there's obviously the formal situations, the mentor protege. There's also the ad hoc. What are there any other things that you've seen too? Like, I mean, I think that there's thought leaders, which could be a form of mentorship, but that's more of somebody putting something out there and then other people consuming it, not directly knowing who's consuming it. That's mentorship in my books.
Yeah, no, I think you're totally right. I mean, like David Hannemeyer Hansen, DHH, the creator of Rails, like he's been a huge influence on me. And I mean, yeah, technically, in many ways, I would consider him a mentor to me, though he has no idea.
Right.
Like there's one video of him giving a talk. I think it was at like a Rails conf, about him talking about how he doesn't consider himself a like software engineer or a computer scientist. That he considers himself like he writes software. He builds software, but he builds information systems, but he's not a engineer. Yeah. And I kind of, while a software engineer is an easy way to describe what I do, I kind of think I would describe what I do very similar to him in that I just like to build stuff. Right. Like I build things and the internet just happens to be my medium. And I like to build tools. I like to build systems, but I don't necessarily I didn't go to school for CS. Right. I didn't go to school for engineering.
Same.
And I think a lot of us, who are kind of self-taught web people, I don't know. Like it was this whole oh, am I a real developer?
I had that for a long time. I had that stigma of am I a real developer? Can I take and warrant it out? And I think once I first realized that, yes, I'm a developer because I bring a product side of things to it. Like my background's in marketing. So I think of how to get a product to market and sell it. And I just happen to use software as the medium and the choice to take and do that because that's an easier way for distribution. If there's another way to take and do that, I will do that, Right. Like I'm doing recording and record production and design and all these different things. The internet happens to be, and building software is the easiest, lower cost way to do that. So it's like,
yeah, it's the medium of the time.
Yeah.
I mean, like I grew up playing with Legos and building stuff, from such a young age that it was natural that coming up in this period of time when the internet was so prevalent that this became the medium like that I chose, because it's so easy to kind of build stuff.
Yeah.
It's magic, really.
Yeah, I mean, going back to also that topic of different mentors that we have that they don't know, like their whole following is. Like, I think of immediately marketing. I think of Seth Godin and his blog that he posts out, all the different things, and the books that he's written has helped me understand product mix and different, like, how to communicate in those different mediums. But he doesn't know who I am, and I've never shook his hand. But he's influenced myself and a lot of people. And the other one that I know that you know very much, who is extremely passionate about what he does, is Gary V. Gary Vaynerchuk. It does a lot of stuff that he actively takes and goes out to take in, talk to people like in DM and different things. But his audience is so huge. But like all the content that he puts out there is like, it mentors a lot of people and helps them go. Like, I know you've posted some things and definitely
he's been
ascribed to some of the thoughts and philosophies there.
No, for sure. Yeah, he's been a huge part of kind of shaping that world.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to think about. So how do you value mentorship in a professional capacity? Like, what is, like, from, if you look at it from a career, it's not going to take, it's not going to be dollars. Like, let's take that off the table. Mentorship, you're not getting anything tangibly out of it. You may get paid to be a mentorship, but that seems like more like a pimp relationship, and I don't even want to go into that right now. But the value of mentorship from being like in any of those like different ways that we talked about, like, how do you personally value mentorship in your life?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it all comes down to relationships. Like, it's interpersonal communication and relationships. Like, we are a social species, and I think it's very natural for us to kind of, we kind of come together as groups.
Right.
And I mean, that's a huge reason why the Chicago tech community was such a huge part early on in a lot of my development as a professional.
Right. So elaborate a little bit more on the Chicago tech groups that you were a part of early on, and then that you've also been like organizing with, and some of the people that you've worked with.
Sure, yeah. So I came to Chicago in 2008, I believe. And at that time, there wasn't much of a community.
Right.
Like, there were still, like, Chicago's a real big ad agency town.
Sales and marketing.
Yeah. And so I came here originally because my brother lived here, and he worked at a digital marketing agency called Manifest Digital. And then I actually interned with them in college. And I came here just because, my brother was here. I liked the town. It's a fun place.
Lots to do.
It's not as big as New York City, but it still gives you a lot of the benefits. And so, yeah, I came here, and there wasn't much of a tech scene. And so I got involved really early on with Seth Kravitz, who he was looking to start a community here in Chicago, like establish an actual startup community. And so I met with him, and together with a couple other people, Mark Bertrand and a few others, we started a company called Technori, which a lot of people in Chicago probably know of now as, like, it's a huge kind of startup showcase. But we started it really early on as just kind of a news site about what was going on in Chicago. And then we would, had meetups and that kind of thing. So we started that, and that kind of blew up. It in a good way.
Blew up, like it expanded quickly.
Yeah. Like people kind of really kind of globbed onto it.
Yeah, they attached themselves to, like, this is filling a need in the market that we had.
Exactly. Like, there are a lot of people in the city who were in the industry, but no one really getting together. And so Technori kind of started to do that. At the same time, with a buddy of mine, Daniel Zarek, we started kind of a weekly or monthly meetup called Chicago Concat, which for the non-programmers out there, Concat is a kind of a programming term to bring together, like essentially you use it to build strings out of multiple.
I get it. I get it. Yeah.
But so essentially, it was a meetup of bringing together people in Chicago.
Concat A plus B is bringing those together. That's
exactly
what it's supposed to do.
Yep.
So.
And so essentially, we would just go to a bar once a month and just kind of sit around, talk, drink, have fun, tell war stories about, what we were working on or what was going on in the industry, that kind of thing. And so we did that for a real long time. It's kind of died down now, just because there's been other kind of people that have taken up the mantle, or like
there's
other
different groups
scenes,
that
the kind of Chicago scene has changed quite a bit, especially with 1871 coming around.
Mm-hmm.
Like they've kind of become more of the established
a town hall place for people to actually congregate, which it's not a bad thing. It's it changes. Like I remember when I first came, everything was done in coffee shops and bars.
Yep.
Not as a bad thing. It's just it was in the neighborhood and people would take and go there. To take in work with that. So you started like you saw the need, you did all these things, and at the level of starting it, you obviously you're a mentor because you're having people come in to this that are taking and working on different areas. So like what value did you see like out of the Concat and out of Technori? It was probably there wasn't you're getting paid for it, but it's like there's a reason that you kept on doing these things.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I think it was just the interpersonal connection.
Yeah.
Finding people like-minded. And then really it was just because we all run into problems in our everyday, professional life.
Right.
And the best way to find solutions to those problems are through other people who have experienced those.
Right.
Like, yes, you can probably figure something out on your own, but it's a lot easier when you have outside of experiences, other people to help figure out like how they did things or like kind of different viewpoints. That kind of thing.
Yeah, I'd like to call that like is unconditional support.
Yeah.
And paying, like, it's also paying it forward, taking a lesson that you've learned or acquired or somehow gotten, and helping it for the greater good. It's just, some people will charge for that. There's a place and a reason for doing that and charging. Like, nothing's ever free. Like, we do get paid. Like, we do things to get paid, but there's some situations where it's like, it's good to just pay it forward, and that's like it help the greater good of the community.
Yeah, well, I think that's one of the big benefits of open source software.
Right.
Like a lot of those people are doing it for the good of humanity,
right?
Essentially, or the community, but they're not getting paid for it, but they're advancing that world. And I kind of saw, the meetups and Technori and all that stuff that we were doing as similar. It was just a very localized, like communal area,
right?
But you still, there's huge networking advantages from it. There's experience advantages from it. I mean, being a part of Startup Weekend, like one, I met you.
Yep.
But I, met a lot of people. I don't know.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with like the touch points, like you said with the Concat meetup. One of the best things that you can look at and talk about with that is people got together on a regular basis, and that's a key thing because without regularity, I think one of the things that you lose in mentorship is authenticity. People are not like, as much as you think going to some of the different technology hubs in different markets and anything, and you hear everybody's there that's like, oh, I'm killing it. I call bullshit on a lot of it because not everybody's killing it. I know that I've struggled on days and stuff where I just need to talk to somebody. And I think that's one of the things that that I've valued out of mentorship in the professional capacity is having somebody that is not a therapist. Like I call it, like the meetup that I would had was like a self-help group for people that really want to cry a little bit in the developer community. We all had the same problems. But it was empathy. Like that was one of the biggest things is empathy and understanding. Like those are two of the biggest lessons that I've learned out of it. Or that's how I value it. So going, like digging deeper into it, what are some of the most valuable lessons that you've learned as a mentor to somebody else or from a mentor? Like there's got to be I have a list of things too. It's like I can go back to like mentors as a child, like, and then growing up and playing football. One of the things that I always learned from my days of playing football, like competitive, and then also in college was punctuality. You handle your business, and if you are 15 minutes early, you're on time. If you're 5 minutes early, you're late. Like those lessons I will never forget. And it's like, okay, when you know, like I try, like if I start to get to like 14 minutes and I'm not there, I personally start to freak out because that was ingrained in me. But that's one of the lessons that I hand. So like I'll start to like text people, hey, I'm going to be late, but you actually showed up on time at the time of the start. It's but the lesson that was the underpinning lesson in that for me was, it was related to getting your mind right to take and tackle the thing at that time, and being mindful of other people's time. So that's one that I have. But like, what have you like? What we could go off on this for a while.
Man, I'm sure there's. I would almost say that the majority of the things that I've learned have been gathered from other people, kind of instructing me and teaching me on that stuff. But I mean, just off the top of my head, I would say I'm similar to yours, where the punctuality. Mine is communication, like an over communication, almost like
transparency.
Right. Yeah. Where communication is the root of like all problems.
Right.
I feel like at least 90%. In that when there's a problem, it's usually because people aren't communicating properly. And so I try to, especially with my clients, but also, in my relationships, in my day-to-day, I try to over-communicate as much as possible.
Right.
Like this morning, I thought I was going to be late, and I texted you like, hey, I'm running a little late.
And I appreciate that.
Right. Gave you a heads up. And then I ended up being like right on time.
Yeah, and it was no worries. Like that's exactly to the point. It's like It's like if there's a situation that you can change, like more information or information is better than no information. I think we have a society where people are afraid to say no, or afraid to like they're worried of. They say they don't care about. Everybody cares like what people think. Like I think we need to stop doing that. Like you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like. Be respectful, talk if it's a no or if it's a maybe. Like nobody's killing it, nobody's doing that. So like that's interesting that like that was the prime example today. Like
and I think to your point about saying no, like there is one of the one thing I've learned over the years is that like I used to be a super agreeable person and just be like, oh yeah, I can take care of that, especially with clients.
Right.
Like they'd ask for something that was out of scope, and I would be like, yeah, I can take care of that. But ultimately, it's we run into problems because of that. And then because I didn't stand tough and say no, like the project will go off the rails and they'll become unhappy. Where if I would have just said from the beginning, like, oh, sorry, that's out of scope. Like if you want to explore that, we can, figure something out with it.
Right.
And usually, they're like, oh, okay, fine. Like either I don't need that or like, okay, yeah, let's do it. And I end up getting more money because of, it being out of scope or something like that.
Yeah.
But
it's tough to say that no. Like it is.
People are afraid to like make people angry or like disappoint them. But it's also like in personal relationships, like I know a lot of people who will just say yes because they don't want to cause a ruckus or, like...
I'm guilty of that occasionally.
Oh, I do it all the time too.
Yeah.
But when you stand firm on like, no, because of this, it ends up being better in the long run.
Yeah.
Like you end up either not hurting people's feelings or disappointing them or whatever. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think on that personal side of things, like saying no, or holding your water, I think it's a good thing. Like you don't have to take and have an opinion on everything. Like there's sometimes like, yeah, fine, let's do that. Like literally I am indifferent. Like tacos or fajitas. Okay, well, they're both going in a shell and they're
both great.
They're both, yeah. I'm like, okay, I'm indifferent. I don't care. But there's things that are important that like, to one person that might be super important, but to another person that may not be as important. Like knowing what things you're willing to stand for is extremely important when you're trying to make decisions professionally, personally, with relationships, with work relationships, because ultimately we like to take and consider like we'll talk about this in a little bit, but work and life is two different things, but work and life kind of work together because it's all relationship based. So if you take and have one opportunity to say no to something in one part of your life, how come you're not using it to say that in the other part of your life?
Yeah.
It's understanding that, your time is valuable, and what is the opportunity cost of you saying yes? Like, I bet there were times when you said yes that it was like, what are the negative benefits of actually saying yes? Oh, that means that this person can ask for anything at any time. They can just run over me, and you're taking and not selling yourself for that. So, yeah, I think it's interesting that you hit on that too. Like, yeah, for me, like the punctuality thing there from mentorship. Another one, like one of the most valuable things that I have learned was from our relationship was a mentor doesn't give answers. A mentor shows, and it's not.
Well, I don't want to make it too easy for you.
Well, no. This is just like in general. It's like you can teach a man to fish, or you can fish with firecrackers. Like, I'm bastardizing that parable on purpose, but it's don't expect a mentor to do everything for you. The whole goal is, if you want this relationship to be good or beneficial, they're going to help you get to a point where you can learn it, because they want you to be able to understand not this bug, but how this particular thing works, so you can see that in other scenarios to understand the concept versus the actual application of it. So, I mean, that's one of the things, like, you've experienced that too, probably from people that you've talked to and have
totally
helped you advance your career.
Yeah, well, I mean, so I'm not a parent, but in many ways, I feel like that's a big part of being a parent.
Okay.
Of like, your goal is to get this little human, tiny person, to an adult.
And not be in jail.
Right, and not be in jail, like not ruin their life, all of that stuff. Not screw them up too much.
Yeah. You screw them up just enough.
Just enough, yeah. To give them personality.
Right.
Like character. But, like you kind of need to, I don't know.
You sometimes need to let them make their own mistakes or try things out. It's not like Jurassic Park, where the velociraptors are testing the fence to see how far their bounds are, but you need to at least have some sort of situations where they can see it, like, and it can be very tough. I think that's like just in the world in general, like we have extremists to the left of like not doing anything, and extremists to the other side where you're like really authoritarian. Like, I think sometimes you have to be in the middle of the road in terms of just like, okay, Johnny wants to have 14 cookies before dinner. Well, if Johnny has 14 cookies, I know that Johnny's going to get sick, but do I really want to listen to, for the next 13 years, Johnny wants 14 cookies for dinner? Or do I want to take and let Johnny be sick for now, and then he realizes I really don't want 14 cookies for dinner, like before dinner?
There's different ways of teaching people, and I don't necessarily think that doing things for them is necessarily the best way, but kind of leading them to where they need to go and make those decisions on their own, or like make those discoveries on their own. That's a lot more impactful.
Yeah. And I think one of the other things that I'll like conclude with mentorship on, like, just this question is, I think around like accessibility. Just because you're somebody's mentor doesn't mean you have to be like hands-on all the time. You just have to be available, and availability could like be in any different things. It's like relationships with friends. Is you have to continually put effort into a relationship. You need to talk to people and not expecting anything in return. Like a mentor relationships where it's just like mechanical. Oh, I have this question. It's just going to die on the table. It seems like that's more of the ivory tower kind of thing. I see mentorship as just a synonym for friendship. And like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think in many ways, it should be, in that like learning is a lifelong thing.
Right.
And you don't know everything. You might be an expert in, like, I think what we talked about earlier, like you might be an expert in one area, but you're not an expert in all areas.
Right.
And just because you're a mentor for one thing doesn't mean that you can't learn from your mentee uh, about other things.
Right.
And so I think I agree. Like in many ways, it should be a friendship, a relationship where you're both learning and helping each other based on your experiences.
Yeah. I mean, I could take the lesson from just Startup Weekend organization standpoint. It's like when you're a participant, you're there to take and do the weekend. You're tasked on that.
Mhm.
And when you move into the organization role, like you learn so much more of the event from the participants than you do from like anything that you could have prepared for. And so that's kind of that relationship right there.
Mhm.
I think that's great to take and do this. I want to segue a little bit into the next little thing and like kind of go back to what we had talked about with Gary Vee and Seth Godin and DHH. They're thought leaders and they're thought leaders in their respective fields,
Mhm.
and they've done different things in there. I want to talk and put on your thought leadership hat and take and go and transition into this, like the building the work life that you want, because a lot of people might be like not surprised but confused how to do this, the steps that can do it to actually get a work life that you feel proud of, like with the amount of travel that you do. You don't have to go into like grave detail, um but the more specifics are potentially good, like the amount of travel, the different work you work on and stuff like that. So the reason I thought it would be great is like building the work life. You've, since I've known you, have had this freelancing model that you've been able to work on, and you seem extremely happy. There's times that are frustrating, but it's good. So let's transition over into like how people can actually build this topic. So build their work life. So
Sure.
first off, like let's talk about your chapters that you wrote, but also what does your work life look like?
So it's interesting because how I've developed my work life, it is very intertwined with
Yeah.
my personal
Or
life.
work
Yeah.
slash life. Like when I say the
Yeah.
work life you want, it's not necessarily the balance. It's like
Yeah.
it's work life. Like it's the career and life choices that you've
Totally.
made.
Yeah. So I learned a little while ago that I am a horrible employee. That I have a hard time working for other people. And that's just me in that I learned that I'm not a 9 to 5er type thing.
Okay.
Like when I do that, it doesn't end well for me. In that I don't have a good a good life balance.
Okay.
Like I either get super obsessive of like, oh, how do I either I'm working too much or whatever. And so I learned that for me the best way for me to have a happy life,
Mhm.
to be fulfilled, to that kind of thing, is really I needed to be out on my own. I needed to be running my own company,
Okay.
and I have essentially decided to do that through freelancing. So I am my boss. I get to say, okay, I'm working now. I'm not working now. Um, and I know that for a lot of people, that's a tough thing to do, like setting your own boundaries.
Yeah.
Like, it's easy to kind of have that bleed into your life,
Mhm.
and kind of get unhealthy. But for me, it provides me enough flexibility that I can establish things or set my life up in a way that works for me.
So what's a day in the life of Zach? Like what's a day in the life of a typical work week, and then what's a day in the life of a typical like personal life?
Mhm.
And then how does that translate to like your travel? Because I know you're not traveling all the time. There's
Mhm.
like there's work weeks,
Right.
and then there's weeks that are off weeks, but they blend together. Like there's a calendar. We have 12 months. Like
Yep.
so, what's a mix look like for you?
Right. So, yeah, I tend to, so a general day for me is I'll wake up whenever I wake up. I try not to use an alarm. The only time I really do that is when I have a scheduled early,
Like a call or a function or a meeting.
exactly,
Yeah.
like where I have to be up at a certain time. But generally, I just try to wake up naturally, and usually, around the same time every day, I'll wake up. I'm not really a morning person. I'm more of a late night person.
Sure.
So my days are a little bit shifted. And so I'll wake up and essentially just start by doing my morning routine of either getting something to eat, I'll probably check my email a little bit, take care of all those like easy little tasks just to get off my plate. And then, you know, once that's taken care of, I'll maybe shower, but it depends on what, you know, I have going on in that day.
Sure.
Yeah, if I'm leaving the house, then I'll definitely, you know, shower and
Get ready,
clean myself up a little bit.
Get primed and ready to take and hit the world.
Exactly.
Okay.
Some days that doesn't happen.
Some days that doesn't happen. Okay.
But yeah, it's really just I try to follow kind of what my mood feels like.
Okay.
I try to also at the beginning of the week flesh out what I need to work on.
Sure.
So essentially slot out like, okay, I have these projects that need to happen. I'll work on, you know, this project on this day or during this period of time. And usually either just get it taken care of and off my plate completely, or okay, that slot is taken care of and now I'm on to the next one and I'll pick that up again.
Yeah,
later.
so from a daily perspective, it's very ad hoc in terms of like it's a loose schedule, but from a weekly perspective, you have to get some sort of idea of what you're working on so you can then forecast out how to take and do the next week. In a given week, how many different projects will you touch base with potentially? Like, will it be as high as 1 or as low as 10 or flip that?
Yeah. So right now, I'm anywhere between like 3 and 6 projects during a week, I would say. And I try to bring those down as much as possible.
Sure.
I'm a firm believer, kind of the focus like on one thing at a time. Try not to multitask too much because then you just shitty results.
Yeah.
But I do have my hands in a lot of
different sandboxes.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of different projects. Like right now, I have 2 different clients that I work with, and I just have a monthly retainer with them that essentially I just designate a certain amount of time each week to work on whatever we have designated I'm going to be working on.
Okay. So how does that work in terms of, for you practically, if you have a bug coming from one client and a bug coming from another client, with your schedule, how do you just take in, does one supersede? Like everybody's important, right?
Yeah.
And you can't say yes to everything. You can't say no to everything. How does that come into play?
Yeah, usually there's some type of ranking. How bad are the fires?
Is the site down, or is this down, or I need this color to be light blue, or robin's egg blue, or fuchsia? Like, okay,
right, exactly. And most things that come in aren't, they're not fires.
Sure,
they're just like, hey, I need this taken care of. Okay, shelve it for now. Like, we'll get to it when it comes up. But yeah, and usually there aren't multiple fires.
Right.
That's usually when things get really stressful of like, oh, I got to do this and I have to do this and I have to do this. Oh, like, but usually it's like, okay, what one is the easiest to take care of first? Like prioritizing.
Right.
And you just take those one at a time, get them off your plate, and try not to freak out too much.
Okay. So we got different projects, 3 to 6. I'm just trying to recap this so we can digest and go like, kind of like a week, month, day, kind of get this whole like the sphere of awesomeness that we call work-life balance figured out. So we start the day, we wake up whenever, we start getting around. If I have to go out, we're going to take and get ready to do that. Then I take and go and I'm working on the tasked project that I scheduled at the beginning of the week. So there's some sort of planning that goes on at the beginning of the week. It's Tuesday, I'm going to work on this. I'll work on this for a few hours and then, it's dinner time. How does work life work around the night part of time? Because as a freelancer, you could, if you wanted to, you could bill 24 hours a day and work 24 hours a day. But I'm pretty sure that you don't want to do that. You, you have other things that are important in terms of, going to be a part of this community, friends, family, relationships. So what is it like? How does that work, and how does that play into developing this work life that you've desired to have?
Yeah, that's a big part of it too. In that the off time is almost just as important as the on time.
Okay.
Like when you're working, and when you're not working. And I know sometimes I can be really horrible at this, and my fiance is actually really good about reminding me, like, hey, you need to shut off because you need to like have that non-on work time.
Right.
And so, when we do dinner,
Mm-hmm.
we do dinner. Like we're not working while, we're eating dinner.
Right.
We are spending time together. We're
It's dinner time.
Exactly.
You got to talk about your day.
Yeah, exactly. Now sometimes when there is a fire or something needs my attention,
Right.
I will actually be like, hey, just so you know, I have this thing that I need to get taken care of. Like, I'm going to be working on this after dinner.
Okay.
And I will take time,
after this situation to go take and address that. It's that over communication that we talked about at the beginning. It's like really talking about that, establishing expectations.
Right, because there are times where like we'll be, done for the day, and then I'll have realized like, oh crap, something happened that I need to like attend to, and I'll pull out my laptop, and my fiance will be like, is that really necessary right now? Do you have to have that done right now? And I'll be like, oh, do I? Like, can it wait till tomorrow? Or like, oh, is this really a fire that needs to be put out right now? Like, and luckily,
if all emails are marked important, none of them are important.
Exactly. And it's one of those where, realistically, like the work that we do on the internet, like no one's dying. Like it's not like a, depending. I know, healthcare, stuff like that. Some people might be.
Yeah.
But generally the work that I do.
Cat photos.
Yeah. It's not to the point where, it's a, huge emergency.
Yeah.
And so most of the time it is one of those of like, you know what? It can wait till tomorrow.
Right.
And, 9 times out of 10, actually sleeping on something, I end up having a better answer, or I end up having a better solution than I would have if I tried to take care of it right away.
Right, than being thrown into I have to think on the spot. And I only said cat photos because I know you had the furry pets.
I did, yeah.
For a while. So like, that's like, is that really a bug? Becky can't see her cat photo. It's like,
yeah, exactly.
Well, she loves them. So, okay. So like, have you ever had an experience where you've had a client that you've worked with that continues to, like, if you set up the expectations of I'm going to be working from these hours on this stuff, that continues to violate those parameters with what may not be truly important things, like every single day XYZ says say you're building a website that indexes blow pops, the candy,
sure.
Right? Say that they're, I need to add a new flavor, and it happens every day during dinner time. How, as a freelancer, as somebody that's running your own business, do you convey to them that this is something that you need to alter the behavior and tell me this? Like, it's not going to get done as a rush.
Right.
Like, is that a situation that you've come across or had?
Oh, totally.
Okay.
Yeah. So essentially how I deal with that is you have to establish boundaries and guidelines with your clients ahead of time.
Okay.
And that is essentially like making sure that they know, like, you are available between these hours.
Right.
Some clients,
for what you've negotiated.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
And for some clients, like, I'm only available to them by email.
Okay.
And I tell them I will respond, like I will have a response within 48 hours. Because that gives me enough time of usually, either if it's the weekend or whatever, like, I try not to be on all the time.
Right.
But I tend to also try to give really good customer service, and where usually if they email me and I see it, I will respond pretty quickly just to let them know, hey,
I've seen this.
See what you're asking me. And you'll just, I'm taking a look at this. I'll have an answer for you again soon.
Yeah.
When I can take care of it. A lot of times when I'm like traveling or something like that, I don't tell my clients ahead of time, because most of the time I would just be needlessly like emailing
them. It freaks them
like,
out. Yeah. It's
exactly.
like, he's not at the server room. Well, we don't have a server room. It's all okay.
Yeah, exactly.
The world has changed, and we'll talk about that too, like how the travel, like your office could be anywhere now.
Right, but I still, when they email me about something, I will say like, oh, just so you know, I am traveling right now. I will get this taken care of the next opportunity that I can.
Yeah.
And most people are like, oh, great, no problem. Like it's not a huge priority, and we just get it taken care of. We slot it in.
Unless it is something's down, then you'll make arrangements to go work for
right.
it. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. But usually that doesn't happen. I try to limit the opportunities for that to happen.
Okay.
Try to mitigate them before they actually do.
Yeah. So we've got so what are some things that you do during the day that break up the day? Because you've talked about having multiple clients, and different things with multiple clients mean different brain space, and you have to take in, there's also stuff that you've talked about, like stopping and making it dinner time. Like dinner time is obviously an event that can break up the day. You can go back to work if you choose for it, but what are some low hanging fruit ad hoc ways that people can take that are doing this that can break up that day?
Yeah. So my two favorite ways of breaking up in between tasks. One, taking a shower.
Okay.
It's probably my favorite.
Nice.
And two, going for a walk.
Okay.
And sometimes we'll be like dog sitting, either for like my brother or friends, whatever.
Sure.
We don't have a dog, but when we are dog sitting,
we'll gratefully take that dog.
We totally will, and we love it.
I'll put your email in so people can bring their dogs to you if they want.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, like just kind of stepping away is such a huge thing of changing, the mindset. Yeah, for me, like either the shower or taking a walk are the two best ways of kind of transitioning. Taking a lunch,
actually leaving the apartment, because you work you work out of your home.
I do work out of my, I have a designated workspace in my living room.
Okay.
And kind
of like Mega Desk where we're sitting right now.
Exactly. And my fiance has an office in our spare bedroom, and so we both work from the house.
Yeah.
And sometimes it can be a little tough to kind of transition, especially at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Like I'm still working and she's making dinner, or something like that, where sometimes it's kind of hard to trigger that. And so,
do you ever put hard stops in?
Yes.
Like time, like I'm done at 6:15. Like,
yeah. I try to end things when tasks are
okay. So
ended.
you do it more of.
I try to do that, but that doesn't always work out that way. Especially with bigger stuff. Like last night, I was working on a project, and it's a big project.
Sure.
And so I completed a big chunk of it.
Yeah.
And I hated actually ending the day not being able to work on the next part of it.
Yeah,
but
putting that whip GitHub commit in there, like, oh god, I don't like having whips.
Yeah.
But it needs to be there because I have to do this because it needs to do this for my personal sanity.
No,
sometimes.
Totally. And but I try to complete whatever task I'm working on. It might not be the whole project. If it is the whole project, great. Then I'm essentially like free for the day, but I try to at least get the main thing that I'm working on. But sometimes that doesn't always have that. Where sometimes, like especially if I'm beating my head against a problem, it's so hard to just be like, I know I need to walk away, and I'll come up with a solution. Like once I do. But I just feel like I need to like just plow through.
Yeah. Do you ever take and go off the computer and have like a piece of paper that you'll write your notes down so that's like, oh, I got an idea. Like I'm going to do this, and then just put it back in the office. And then just kind of like Seinfeld where I'm keep going there because I love that show, but he's like, oh, I got this like bit for there, but I'm not going to take and address this now. Has that been a solution that's worked for you?
So I'm really bad about physical paper, but I do have those I'll do like a notepad on my phone. But
same thing, same concept.
Same idea, just different, slightly different medium. But the idea is the same. Or just walking away from it, whether it's the shower or the walk.
Right.
Usually taking that time away and just kind of like, okay, I'm going to stop thinking about this. Or try to stop thinking about this. Usually just that stepping away helps me think about things in a different way.
Yeah, it recalibrates.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so usually like that's the best way for me to do it.
That's cool. So right now we've hit the day starts, you do stuff, you have a hard stop, you try to put hard stops on when you're shifting gears. It's all done based upon what you decide at the beginning of the week. You need to have that personal stuff to end the day for that. So that's the day we talked about, like what the week looks like. Hey, you have potentially 3 to 6 clients at a time, potentially even less or more, depending on the workload. That's the week. So what does a week to week look like in the terms of like a month? Like, because I know that, well, let's look at it from like a quarter. So you're working, a quarter has what, 12 weeks? Well, let's just,
give or take, yeah.
Yeah, what, 16? Yeah, something like that. Let's do 3 months, 4 months or so. You have like 16 weeks or something like that. What does a typical 16 weeks look like for you? And this is kind of like where it's going to be interesting because I know where you're going to say about this. How many days, how many weeks of those are you on working and off working?
So it totally depends on
the time of year. Yes.
Right. Yeah. Because we try to designate a certain amount of time for travel.
Right.
And usually, I probably take a significant amount of vacation. That's one of the reasons why I don't work well in a 9 to 5, because I don't get enough vacation.
Yeah. Okay. So let's move this scenario. So
Sure.
let's do a mix. So the year is, let's say there's a year. Like, are you 70-30 working on vacation? Are you 50-50? What's the mix in terms of a percentage? Like, instead of trying to narrow it down to a week,
Right.
what's the goal and what have you been able to do? And also, is a vacation always a vacation, or can you work remotely?
Yeah, so we do often work remotely.
Okay.
And
that's a benefit, I'm assuming.
Yes. Usually, as long as it's not a international trip.
Okay.
So if it's still in the U.S., we will be working to some extent, whether it's just checking emails, like making sure things aren't blowing up, responding to things, whatever.
But you could full on build a site. Like, there's nothing that's stopping you for that.
Yeah, it's just usually when it's an international trip with international data and access to that stuff, it can get a little tricky, and we try not to be too hard fast with like deadlines and stuff.
Right.
But yeah, so we try to do probably, I would say 60-40 working to vacation for the year. That's my ideal, I think. We are actually in a period right now where we're working more and trying to take off vacation less. We just came back from vacation, but that was like just a week, and it was earned.
Yeah.
But we're trying not to take too much. Like last year was kind of a period where I would probably say that was close to 70-30.
Right.
Of
work vacation?
Work to vacation, which was great, but it was also it was one of those where it does affect your work,
right?
Or like your business, in that when you're away, you're not doing business development.
Right.
You're not, that
the
kind
pipeline
of thing.
takes and goes, and
exactly.
It doesn't dry up completely, but you have to take and put that scenario in there.
Exactly. And I was lucky that when we did take vacations last year, it was usually during periods where I had already established pipeline.
Yeah.
I already had clients that were there, and they knew, I'm going to be away for this amount of time. And we just established that with our plans.
So do you use vacation in your work-life balance as a thing that's like what keeps you from going batshit crazy, or is it used as a reward for taking and doing different things? Like, because that's one of the things that, like, yes, if you're taking and starting to do a freelance lifestyle, you have this opportunity to do that. But should you do this? Like, should you go travel all the time? Like, or should you use this as like, I finished this project, or have this in the bank? Or I just booked this $50,000 client for a 3-month thing. I'm going to use 25 of that to go tour this. It's like, well, shit, you got to do the work. Like, how do you take and you, like, is it justified? If it's not, cool. That's like,
yeah, I think for us, travel is such a huge part of our world. Like, for me, it's about getting away from like kind of the mundane world that we live in,
to break
generally.
Up,
yeah.
It's again to like the same topic as breaking up the task to take you most productive for when you are in the task.
Exactly. Like, and I'm a firm believer, like, this world is kind of such a crazy, cool place that I want to see as much of it as possible.
Rightfully so.
And so when I'm stuck in Chicago for too long, I get super antsy. Like, I need to go somewhere else. And it doesn't even need to be like, it could even just be like a drive up to, Wisconsin,
Milwaukee, yeah.
or which we love Milwaukee, like even just taking the train up there.
Yeah.
Like, we'll do that, at least once a year, for a weekend at a time or whatever, just to kind of break things up.
Yeah, it's not that Chicago's bad. It's just it's life. It's like
You just need to change the pace.
sometimes that's like to recalibrate and stuff.
Yeah, and for us, like, that's not necessarily what works for everyone. Like, I know
Right.
some people who are very happy, like, in their little world, without leaving it. Not going on vacation, not like breaking it up and adventuring.
Sure.
And that's great. Like, whatever works for you. It's about figuring out what works for you, and actually, kind of figuring out that process,
Right.
and living the life that you like want.
That's cool. That's cool. So 70-30 right now, but you ideally want to go to a 60-40 relation.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So I think the next question that I have is how long did it take you to get to the level of comfortability, like doing freelancing, to where you are at now? Like how long, like we talked that you've got, over a decade of experience. It's over like 15 years of experience. You weren't taking trips and jet setting 60-40 off your first contract. I know that for a fact.
Yep.
I will bet you one candle that's burning for a fact that that's the case. So how long did it take you to develop your business and your network and stuff like that to have this relationship? Because there's probably people that are here today. It's like, I want to freelance and I want to travel to Bali and do all this, but don't have the contacts or the pipeline that you have. Like, and maybe explain like some of the contacts and pipeline that you've been able to build, not in detail, but like, how did you build your pipeline to be able to do this?
Yeah, so this has really only been a recent thing within the last, like, probably 2-3 years that I've really been able to do this. Like, I've been trying to travel while working for a couple of years now, and when I've tried to do it while I was full-time employed, it doesn't work.
Right.
Like, I've gotten fired over trying to, like, essentially taking too much vacation.
You can get close, but then there's like, okay, you're pushing the limit a little bit. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And but for me, it's only been recently that I've been able to do that in a healthy way, in a way that, like, one, you have to kind of establish when your business needs more of your attention.
Right.
And that's kind of one of those, like, ebbs and flows of business. Especially with pipeline, like,
right.
You figure out when are the hot periods, when are the slow periods, and you adjust accordingly. Like, my fiance and I, like, we know during the holiday season, like between, Thanksgiving and, just after New Year's, tend to be relatively slow periods.
So you can then book your travel to go see family.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or we'll take trips, like we'll go to Hawaii or Mexico or, wherever during those periods when we know, we'll probably not have projects booked up during that period, or we just establish, like, those periods are for us. We're taking those down from our calendar.
Yeah. So I mean, you're saying it's just in the past 2-3 years that that's happened. So you're taking and saying, like, you've been at, like, the freelancing for an extended period of time. It took several years for you to get to a point where you felt comfortable at this.
Yeah, I think a lot of that also is the community in general has gotten better about that. Like, there are more people who are kind of like digital nomads, or
I hate that term.
I know, but yeah, like people who travel on a regular basis. And have gotten better about figuring out how to do this.
Yeah.
Also, like the use of like Basecamp or other project management tools have made it a lot easier to communicate with clients in a, like, reliable manner, so that where I could be wherever and still have access to it and still send email or whatever. The prevalence of Wi-Fi or cell phone service.
And I mean, the fact that we as software engineers, product people on the internet don't need to be tied to a physical server in the server room anymore.
Yeah, no, totally.
The cloud has done great things. So like literally we can
Yep.
take our laptop and go wherever. I mean, I've done, not to the extent of your travel, but last year I spent a week in California. We rented a house there. And why? Because it was March and I wanted to get out of Chicago because it was cold, and worked remotely for that week doing my normal day job, and then was on vacation at night. And so we went to a couple hockey games and we did this. I know California hockey, but still, it was NHL teams that I'd
better
never.
Than Florida hockey.
I've seen Florida hockey, Florida Panthers. It's not great. It was empty. The stadium was empty, but I digress. But like that was for me. That was like my first foray into it. It's like I was working during the day. There was a little bit of a time shift, but I was a tourist at night, and so I was on vacation. And then I had 2 weekends. I had the front weekend and the second weekend there that I was on vacation, which was, and I implore people, if they have that ability to take and do their organizations, it's a way to, it really takes discipline, because you have to have an understanding of like, I am working. Like you have to be available. You have to have some sort of like a remote situation. You have to be set up for it. You can't just like go, okay, Frank is going to take and go do this now. But it's like, you have to be understanding of like, I think a lot of the people who work from home or are freelancers now that have experience should take and do that, because it's a great way to, kind of, again, we talk about this, break the mundane up, switch topics so you can focus on what you're doing when you're doing it. So
yeah, and I think a big thing that allows us to do that is that a lot of my projects aren't necessarily like I'm not interacting with my client like
right.
we're
You're not actively developing something there.
Right, they're not
you have
seeing me,
autonomy.
Right, exactly. Like, and I'm not like interacting with them. We're not having a back and forth to get a project done. It's okay, I have this task. I can take care of this whenever, as long as we get it taken care of by this time.
Right.
And so I can be
and
traveling.
I have all the details to do that.
Exactly. So a lot of times, like, I'll do work on a plane or on a train, or while I'm in
an automobile.
Yeah, even then, where I'm actually like, I'm in transit taking care of work. They don't need to know where I'm actually doing the work, just that the work gets done. And so it's kind of like being creative about how you get that stuff done. It's about getting the work done, not about how you do it. Yeah.
You still have to do it. I mean, that's the main factor with all of this. You have to do your work, otherwise you won't be able to afford that lifestyle. And you've been able to have, and I know that you've had several freelancers that you've worked with on that book that you did contributed chapters to, where you've maintained a 6-figure lifestyle by doing that and working the ways that you've wanted to, which is pretty awesome. So I know you alluded to it a little bit previously, but I wanted to explicitly ask, what is and / was the main motivating factor for pursuing the freelance career versus a traditional 9 to 5? Like, you found out that you wanted to do vacation, but that probably isn't the main reason why you wanted to do this.
Yeah, so I mean, the big part of that is realizing it's self-awareness. It's realizing who you are and how you best work. Like for me, I realize like when I'm stuck at a desk 9 to 5, I very quickly become very unhappy.
Okay.
And so I need that kind of breakup of the day-to-day, or following my body and mind, to really have a healthy relationship and to still be productive.
Okay.
And travel is a big part of that, in that, like I mentioned earlier, like this world is crazy cool. There's so much of it, and I've seen like 1% of it.
Right.
And so we only have one life. And so I want to see as much as I can. I want to see, I want to experience as much as I can. And I have figured out essentially a career, a job, a lifestyle that allows me to do that.
So why not if you've already put the effort into doing that, why not take if the door's open, walk through that door to take.
Yeah, I mean, we're very fortunate, and I realize that this is coming from a position of privilege. Like, not everyone can do this,
right?
But I am able like I'm fortunate enough that I am I have a skill set that
Right.
is very in demand, and that I can, I make a decent amount of money and I can go live the lifestyle that I want because someone is willing to pay me to do that.
Right.
And I don't need to be tied down to a specific place. Like the internet is a marvelous thing.
Yes.
It's magical, really.
It's also scary.
It is. It is. A lot of weird stuff out there. But yeah, I'm still able to kind of do things a little different from what we've been sold as like what you have to do
As
like
the path.
exactly, like the college 9 to 5, wife, kid,
Yep.
progression. Like you can do things a little different if you have that ability, and I do. So
Do you think you can do this? Like, I know that you're taking and doing more contract work, freelance style. Do you think you can do this if you're building a startup, or do you think the startup kind of falls into the traditional sense where you, kind of like in the early thing, you need to be with the people you're building it with, or like if you're building a decentralized startup, it's like you need to have those like constant conversations because things are forming. Do you think that you'd be able to have your lifestyle that you've chosen in a like traditionally building a tech startup?
I think you can.
It's probably a little difficult.
It probably is a little bit more difficult, but so I built some software last year with 2 guys, one who's in Vancouver and one who's in San Diego. I have never met them in real life, but we built software together. Slack, Skype, using those tools. Essentially, we were in communication every single day.
Right.
We were able to completely flesh out and build the product, and then a year later sold
whilst
it.
You were traveling and doing your other stuff. So
yeah, exactly.
It can be done, but you need to take and make. So I guess it is like you just like it's just a reallocation of what a freelance contract is. Just the payment terms or whatever is just different. So you're taking and looking at it more of a long play instead of a short. Like this is something that has a hard, fast deadline for you to collect on.
Yeah.
Do you have any like? I don't know why this just popped into my head, but like when you're out of the office and traveling and you have invoices due, how do you keep and do like how do you do that? Like how do you stay on top of that? Or do people like pay you in front? Like
yes, a huge way of kind of making sure that you don't run into issues, collecting payment up front.
Yeah.
So I'm lucky in that a bunch of my clients right now are on retainer.
Nice.
So monthly retainer. As long as they're paying me, they have reserved my services.
Right.
And usually along with that, we'll have, X amount of tasks that need to be done during
that
the
they
month.
come up with. And
yep,
you
exactly.
Just
Or we establish those together.
Sure.
And I just bill them monthly. Usually I have it set up. It just charges their credit card through Stripe every month.
Okay.
That's the easiest way. And when there's an issue with a payment, like I'm not doing work until I get paid.
Right.
That's a huge way of kind of alleviating that headache. There's also for like kind of more one-off projects, I'll usually collect 50% up front or 100% up front.
Right.
But usually, if it's a big amount, it'll be 50% up front and then the other 50% upon like completion
upon delivery
of either certain tasks or upon delivery.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I could see like if you're not like, yes, your laptop's probably got everything on there, but if you're windsurfing and off the coast of Bali or, picking grapes in Salerno, and you're not at your laptop and something goes wrong or something happens internationally and oh wow, this client was supposed to pay me and it's not here. That's a lot harder to track down while you're doing international travel.
Yeah, I try to automate a lot.
Yeah,
of that
automate that stuff. That's really cool. I think. How did you know when it was time? How did you know when it was time that you were wanting to take and change this lifestyle from? Like, what was the nexus of that? Like, not the main motivating factor for pursuing it. Like, when did you say I'm a freelancer? I'm on my own.
Well, so I mean, a lot of that's self-awareness, kind of figuring out what works for you and what doesn't. The most like I've always, in many ways, I've been freelancing on and off over the last couple of years, because freelancing is a very flexible and wonderful kind of way of working. but most recently, the last time, and what really solidified like freelancing is a method that works for me was when I got fired from my last full-time job, because it wasn't the lifestyle that I wanted. Like
Right.
it didn't work with who I was, and my performance resulted because of it.
Okay.
Like I was just not happy, and because I wasn't happy, I wasn't taking care of myself, and I wasn't working to the best of my ability.
Right.
And because of that, I got fired.
Okay.
And so a lot of those, like it was learning the lesson the hard way, but it was one of those where it was the best possible outcome.
Yeah,
because
it was that catalyst that kind of
exactly. Yeah, like it was one of those things that I had always kind of figured, like that, But it was almost like, oh, I'll take this full-time job because, X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
But I know I'm not going to be super happy, but I'll do it anyways. And then those reasons end up,
For sure.
not being why I like needed to be there.
Yeah.
And so going it back out on my own as a freelancer was like, oh yeah, no, this makes sense. This is like actually why I should be doing this. Yeah.
So $1 million question is, are you happy right now with how things are going? Like with the amount of business, like do you have too much, too little? Like is the life blend working for what you'd expected, like what you sought out?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I am the happiest professionally that I have ever been.
Okay.
Now that's not to say that there aren't, hiccups, or that there aren't like periods where I'm a little bit stressed, or like things aren't working perfectly. But more or less, like I'm doing the best work that I've ever done. I'm working on the types of projects that I want to be working on.
Mm-hmm.
And I have that flexibility of if I need to go on vacation, or I need to travel, or whatever.
If I need to be here to support something else.
Exactly. I have that flexibility, and that alone is like the peace of mind that kind of provides me that happiness, and that, I don't know.
That's cool. That's cool. Because like literally you started to allude to my next question that I have written down. It's, what are some of the current fears that you have when it comes to your freelancing work? Like what are some of the big things that you've seen that you're afraid of in your personal practices? Or what are some things that you've experienced that can help others to like know, like I one of my biggest fears is personal runway, insecurity, because that's a big fear, not knowing the pay, like when pays are coming in. You can do all your best, but sometimes clients won't pay you. That's a reasonable fear to have. So developing a runway to take and make that transition is a huge thing. So like, what are some things that you've encountered, not just in this transition out after this last role, but previously, like in some of your earlier startups?
Yeah, I mean, so how I'm like have my business set up now has removed a lot of the fears that came with like full-time employment. Like, one of the big fears, getting fired, and then all of a sudden you're out of, a job and money
and health insurance and everything.
All of that stuff, like huge headache. And so now I don't worry about that because I am my boss. Like I'm not going to fire myself.
So you don't have that, but you still have the benefit. You still have to worry about getting a paycheck and getting the other stuff. You won't get fired, but
right. But I've also set my my business up so that, like, one, I have multiple clients. I have residual income coming in from various projects.
Okay.
Where it is very, very, very unlikely that all of those are going to dry up
right
at a moment's notice.
Right.
Like, yes, one client may all of a sudden decide like, oh, hey, we're going to terminate our agreement.
And sometimes that's fine.
And sometimes that happens, but I'm not totally screwed,
right? Because
I still have those other sources, helping out.
Right.
And so usually it's just like, oh, okay, I have some new availability. Like, I'll reach out to other clients, either people, that have been, reaching out to me asking about my availability, or, something like that. I try to keep the pipeline, relatively flowing
right
continuously anyways, but, sometimes I am booked up and I just have to.
So what steps have you done to keep your pipeline full? Because I know that that's one of the problems that I've heard numerous
Mm-hmm.
people experience. It's like, yes, I do have these different things, like, or I would just rather work on the project and have
Mm-hmm.
somebody else deal with the pipeline. So
Yeah.
like, how do you keep your pipeline full? I know a lot of it is personal recommendation from
Mm-hmm.
doing good work, but are there any like tactics or other sources that you like? Can I go to Elance or can I go to Odesk? It's like, yes, you can, but you won't be happy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I mean, a lot of it,
Not because of the services, but sometimes the clients are
right? Yeah, you're not getting
they
the best.
well, they focus the projects focus on race to the bottom on price. It's
Mhm.
not that the services are bad. I just wanted to add to that note, not to bash them as services.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so a big thing is niching down professionally, like becoming an established authority on a certain like either technology or like a certain area
Mm-hmm.
helps greatly because then you become essentially you become the kind of the person to go to
Yeah.
for this thing. Like one of my coworkers, Kurt Elster, he is a Shopify professional.
Okay. So
And
anytime you have a Shopify, you go to Kurt.
exactly. And he does amazing work. He is, you know, a Shopify, like he is listed as a Shopify professional. People just come to him because they know that he can do what they need him to do.
Right.
Because they need an e-commerce store, you know, and he's the one that can make that happen.
Yep.
My fiance is a Squarespace professional. She works specifically for those. She has a very specific thing. It's weekofthewebsite.com. And people come to her because they need a specific thing and she can take care of that. You know, for me, I have essentially started becoming known as like a startup, like a small software prototyper. Like I can build out ideas very easily and quickly for specific things.
Right.
And so I have people coming to me because they know that I can do that.
Right.
And whether I'm available or not, you know, like sometimes we'll just book out further. But yeah, usually that's how.
That's how you keep the pipeline full.
Yep.
It's like you market yourself for that, and you just have people that are around you doing that.
Yeah, when you do everything, people have a hard time knowing when to come to you for a specific thing.
Right. They don't know what you're taking and doing. Like you can have different verticals, which is fine, but then
Right.
just have to brand those as different verticals. You're working on this at this, you're working on this at this, or it'd be an agency where you say, "Hey, I do all this stuff," but know how to take and like directly affect what your message is to the person who might be doing needing that message. So that's interesting. That's good bits, good kibble and bits for my brain right there. Kind of going to wrap up with one of my last questions is, what has been the greatest benefit personally and professionally that has come from your freelancer work life?
Oh, I think it's the flexibility, like being able to establish kind of the life that I want to lead, and live. Really just that flexibility allows me to, like, if something comes up, like a friend reaches out, like, hey, I'm going to be in X place, you know, on this week, you know, can you go? A lot of times, you know, most people be like, oh, I have to work. I am lucky enough that I have been able to be like, oh, sure, let's do it.
Yeah.
You know, and either I can still take care of any client stuff while I'm there, or I just set that time aside of like, this will be taken care of later.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. Mostly just I've been able to travel more than most people usually do because of that flexibility.
Yeah. And like traveling, obviously travel is your hobby. So we could think of it too as like, that's what your 60/40 is geared towards. It's travel. So other people's 60/40s may be geared towards something completely different. So like you said before, like
Golf.
you can golf, family, it could be making music, which is another stuff. Like, so the 60/40 is like almost like the goal of what you wanted to do. And, you know, that may be practically working 2 weeks a month, that may be working for 2 months now, 3 months later, you know, doing a shift. there's no recipe or reason as to like how you're going to get to that mix. Except for like, just to summarize some of the stuff that we talked about, is like, you have to understand business pipeline. You have to get that nailed down. You have to understand how to take into task management for yourself. Like, from what I heard is like, you would, if you didn't have an understanding of task and product management, you wouldn't be able to do any of this. Like, you'd get overwhelmed, and it would probably be more stress than if you were just to sit and work and work a 9 to 5. Like, even though it's in the dynamic that we've talked about, it's a bad thing, it would be stressful there. So, I think that's it. It's amazing to just like see how these two topics were related. Because mentorship obviously talks about, like, you became a mentor, and you're talking about thought leadership and mentorship around this specific topic. Zack, thank you again for being on the podcast today. Like, I hope you had a great time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It was an absolute treat. And yeah, again, as I like to do on the podcast, is open the floor to you to share anything with the audience that you may have left out, any of the topics whatsoever. If you want to sing, My Heart Will Go On, you can do that too.
Oh, that's very tempting.
It's very tempting. But Zack, the floor is yours. Like, anything you want to share with the audience?
I think the big thing is, if you have the ability, like, don't be afraid to do things a little different. Like, that's one way for you to stand out in kind of this crowded world, but it also allows you to not get kind of stuck in that rat race. Like, you can build the life that you want, like, that works for you.
Right.
Like, we live in such a interesting time with the internet and all of that stuff. Like, you have flexibility. Like, you don't have to have the 9 to 5 and have the boss telling you what to do. Like, if you want to, you can totally build kind of the business and the life that you want that works for you. And don't be afraid to kind of try to explore that.
Yeah. And say no to things. Saying no opens up a lot more opportunities to say yes to what you're really happy about. So, Zack, thank you for being on the show. As I like to do sometimes with the people that come on the show in person in the recording studio, I'd like to give token of my appreciation here. So here you go, Zack. If you could let people know what you've got there.
Oh boy.
Yeah. And then if you also flip into the first or second page, you'll see some stuff there too.
Okay. So this is,
it's a magic book.
It's a copy of David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. And let's see. Oh boy. It looks like it is
a Monopoly.
A Monopoly, from a McDonald's Monopoly card. Oh, Jewel.
Yeah.
And then there is an inscription on the inside cover that says, "Zack, thank you for the support and guidance."
Some other stuff. Yeah.
Of my life forever, joyful for you.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks, Patrick.
Yeah, thank you. I bought that book a few years ago as a magic book, and it was not definitely. I'm like, what the heck, David Copperfield? I have been duped, but I figured it's going to be a good.
Oh, that's funny.
It's going to enjoy a new home too.
I love it. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you again.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. If you're listening, thank you for joining us. Again, for episode 11 of the Opinionated Stance podcast. If you're here listening and you still haven't done so, visit opinionatedstance.com. Zack is watching you. He's got that webcam. He's watching you right now. So also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and Google Play. Also subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, show ideas, reach out. We love to hear feedback. And thank you again. I cannot stress this any more than I do. The support has been wonderful. Thank you again for listening to the shows and continuing to listen. Until next time, cheers. We are out.